Welcome back. You're watching a CNBC TV 18 special where we're looking back at the last 25 years since India became a more liberalized economy than what it was pre-1991. To continue our conversation forward, then, Mr. Mal, tell us in terms of the impact the momentous reforms have had on brand. As Indians, at an FMCG level, are we really brand conscious and brand loyal?
Well, I think our incomes are growing. We are becoming middle class, where the old way of big brands advertising on fewer channels in a captive distribution route to reach the consumer, that is being dismantled simultaneously. So it's a very interesting playground. It becomes level playing ground for people with ideas and people with products that connect with the customers afresh. Also, this consumer, while everybody economically calls it the emerging consumer, I also see this as a very asserting consumer. She's able to have her way. She's able to make even the biggest global brands mend their proposition to serve her. And therefore, local brands, newer brands, have a much interesting playground. Also, the new modern distribution channels are less complicated and more sophisticated, and therefore smaller brands, regional brands, are able to harness the bunch of supermarkets that exist in their region, reach the customer instead of following which large multinationals have done over generations to reach out to the fuller India. You can as Rama mentioned, you can do business with the early adopters, well-to-do top 20% of India, serving them through the modern retail channels, and then build with that strength to fuller India. That pattern of brand building has already started happening.
Right. Rama, which are the 2 or 3 brands that immediately come to your mind, when I say that brands that have actually been able to ride the reforms, I mean, brands that were there pre-1991 and who sort of transformed themselves post-1991, and brands that are still very relatable till today. Which would those brands be for you?
Actually, I'll tell you the brands that I think have continuously, I don't know whether they were there pre-1991, probably not, but Airtel is one of them. I think it's just done an absolutely fabulous job in sort of hooking itself to the Indian consumer. If you look at the entire sachetization of the internet itself, I know people who before a wedding, the whole wedding party will get on WhatsApp for the period of the wedding and then get off it. I mean, just the entire distribution, the stuff that goes with it, I think has been fantastic. I like Nokia too, though it's not very fashionable, I guess, to say so, given where Nokia is today. But I think Nokia significantly, suppliers shape consumers as well. And I think Nokia basically showed the Indian consumer what you can get for such little price. You can get a dual language keyboard. You don't have to have a big bulky phone. You can get everything the rich guy gets and get enormous performance at that particular price, give or take a few frills. And I think that was one of the things that changed it forever. I love Indigo. I mean, I think Indigo has basically shown us what all we're willing to do for better productivity and lower price, including clearing our own garbage before we get off the plane. So I think there are several of these. I think Hero Honda continued to, in some ways, also be part of the if you like, the lifeline or the bloodline of middle India. So these are brands that have actually built mass, not done Sasta, Sundar, Tikau, this is all you get at this price. I think they've created value, they've led consumers. I actually think Big Bazaar as well has democratized retailing a lot more, and you just have to go to an outlet the day before Republic Day to actually see what kind of people are coming in and what they actually buy. So I think brands are supposed to be markers of the time and space they're in. So I guess we should look really at which brands are markers of the last 25 years rather than which ones have survived and which ones haven't. I mean, I think the Bajaj makeover has been fantastic too. So.
From scooters to motorcycles.
And Maruti continues to reign supreme. I love their brand.
Right. There's one other issue that I wanted, all my three guests to basically, reflect on and give your views on. And Karthik, maybe I'm going to start with you, because I think the big takeaway from these reforms has been the fact that customer is indeed now the king. But at the same time, we are seeing that even though companies are using databases to basically try and understand what the consumer really wants, public trust in businesses, however, seem to be at an all-time low. Even in the US, that seems to be the case. I was speaking with Anand Mahindra last month, and he also voiced his concern with respect to this. So in a situation like that, how can, would you say that there are a lot of opportunities for companies on one hand, but also at the same time, there are a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to their image?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you just dial it back a bit, if you look at the one of the real large changes that has happened due to liberalization is that pre-liberalization we had brands who focused on one stakeholder, which was the customer, and they didn't really do a particularly good job at that. After liberalization, they realized that they had to not only bother about the customer, because there was a far more competition and the stakes were much higher, the expectations were much higher, but they also had to bother about employees and prospective employees, because there's scarcity of talent. They had to bother about investors, because people, they needed money, and the number of mutual funds and FIIs involvement was far higher. And they also needed to bother about the community at large. So we've actually gone from being brands being single stakeholder entities to multi-stakeholder entities, and any lapse in any of these areas leads to a fall in trust. So you can have a great brand on the consumer front, and because of some kind of issue at the employee level or at a community level, like take Coke and Kerala or anything of that nature. So you can be a great brand on one hand with consumers, and you may take a beating somewhere else. So companies and brands have become multi-stakeholder entities, and that's where I think the entire focus of building trust, the challenges and opportunities both lie.
Rama, come in on that, because it takes many years to build the reputation of a brand, but one scandal may tarnish that brand, and some companies may not even recover from that. Your take on this?
Specifically to your question, and I will answer it more broadly as well, I think that consumers also are forgiving when mistakes have been genuine. I think we've seen it. We've seen it with Cadbury's, we've seen it with Maggi, we've seen it with a lot of other brands, that when there is, we've seen it with Nokia. So I think when genuine problems do occur for whatever reason, I do think that brands don't go into, non-recoverable deaths. They get resurrected as well. Having said that, I think that the dharma of business is to add value to consumers and extract value from them. And that is, I think, the yardstick to which increasingly brands are being forced to be held. Now, while we have seen a lot, in fact, what has really shaped the landscape, the consumer landscape and the landscape for brands in recent times, particularly in financial services, telecom, where there are regulators, or even in the auto sector with the Supreme Court and so on, is shock and awe regulation. We've seen regulation that has basically knocked entire sectors off their feet to come back again with great difficulty. But I think these have actually been for the better. And I think that companies are being, so if you look at, for example, the recent consumer protection of law of the Reserve Bank, it's basically telling banks that suitability of selling the suitable product is actually your problem and your responsibility, and it's not buyer beware. Now, I think that is certainly forcing sellers of products to sit down and say, how do I evaluate suitability? Do I have structures to evaluate suitability, and so on? Similarly, if you look at what happened with insurance, or what's happening with telecom, or what's happening with net neutrality, and so on, I think that the regulators have actually, or just indeed promoting competition itself, which is what our competition regulators are also looking at. I think things where the consumer doesn't know what the consumer doesn't know, I think the regulator is doing it. Of course, it is
so
also...
despite free markets, government governments will continue to have a very, very important role to play.
Not governments, but regulators. Theoretically, regulators
Appointed by
are
the government.
independent. Theoretically, they are independent and are supposed to fulfill the dharma of regulation. But I think by and large, if we take a dispassionate look at regulators, while they have been painful, I think they have been good.
Right. Rama Bijapurkar, Kartikeya Kompella and Damodar Mal, thank you so very much for joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 special. I wish we could have gone on for another half an hour more, but we need to end the show here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that was the CNBC TV 18 special, looking back at the 25 years since India adopted the road to economic liberalization. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.